Hi, Mallory, should I start talking? Awesome. Um, Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us and hear a little bit about what Valence's summit in New York was all about. The theme that we were really excited about is this concept of the frontier and the front line. We know that there's so much research going on, there's so much changing so quickly, and sometimes we get the ivory tower effect of all of us sort of talking about what's happening in AI and like what's possible. And the reality is, a lot of the people that we're serving in these very large companies, the actual front line, aren't getting those experiences. And we're struggling to kind of bridge that frontier technology and being able to change people's day to day on the ground. So today, my colleague Anand, who leads our European office, and myself are going to kind of lead you through some of the sessions from that. I realize I did not properly introduce myself. My name is Alex. I'm one of Valence's founders, and I lead our commercial and client team, which means that I spend all of my time chatting with HR leaders who are grappling with this exact question. How the heck do we bring this amazing technology that is revolutionizing everything into the hands of not just our salaried workers, but also the people who are working in stores, working on production lines, driving delivery routes, all of these things. So I am very excited to kick it off with our first session with our CEO, Parker Mitchell, who's going to explain how he is seeing the advances that we're making in the amount of context and the amount of personalization that is possible with these AI applications, and how we're thinking about delivering that to our client partners. I'll pass it over to the first session.
We think that the question that is most important, the question that 5 years from now we will look back and we will say we wish we spent even more time than we are exploring and trying to answer, is how well did we help our workforce transition to this new human plus AI era? And we think that's probably the defining question of 2026. And 2026 is the year in which the trajectories will start to get hardened. And when we first held this summit, it was a very different AI world. We were still in early days. We were still experimenting. People would tell their friends that they had ChatGPT write a sonnet for their partner's birthday, and that was the big exciting thing. And fast forward 2 years, I think we all know that AI is going to change work. It is going to change jobs. It is going to change the companies that succeed and fail. And we are all wrestling with how do we bring our workforces along in this transition. And one of the things that we're excited about with Summit, these types of summits, is we bring together two different sets of worlds, two different sets of folks experiencing AI in very different ways. And so we get a chance to hear from people who are at the frontier of how AI is scaling and how AI is growing in its capabilities, as well as people who are on the front line of how AI is being adopted, how it is being rolled out, and how it is changing work. Our very first summit, we had a chance to hear from Jeffrey Hinton on the frontier side of things, sharing his stories about what it's like to be on the exponential curve. And the thing that struck me most about my conversations with him was how he said, despite being, he's the godfather of AI, the Nobel laureate, despite being as close to this technology as anyone, he underestimated how quickly the capabilities would grow. And so this is kind of the exponential world we're in. And then I think for us, for many of the people in the room, we're wrestling with this question of the experience that we have with AI in the workforce doesn't match to what we're hearing about the quality of the models and the capabilities and the changes that we see possible. And I think bringing those two communities together to talk through, to exchange ideas, to learn from one another, that's one of the main purposes of Summit. Now, one of the reasons why we think there's such a gap is because of how hard it is to understand and wrestle with this idea of AI. It is not like anything we've experienced before. It's a form of intelligence, and it's hard to figure out how to work with intelligence. And my best friend described it using an analogy from Rain Man. If I use a Rain Man analogy, how many people? There's a few heads going up. All right. He said, I've been using these LLMs for a year and a half now. He said, and I never know, am I going to get 246 toothpicks? Which is like, how did you figure that out? Or am I going to get, I can't cross the street? 2025 was a year we had to go to AI. We had to try to understand what AI was. But at Valence, we've been really focused on this idea of personalization. And what we've seen in the underlying architectures and the power of the models and our ability to incorporate them into an AI coach is that 2026 is going to be the year in enterprise where AI is going to come to you. And AI is going to come to your workers where they are, and it's going to try to understand them instead of them going to AI and trying to understand AI. And so I want to share a little bit about this, but I want to begin with a couple of threads that tie together why we, Valence, are here and standing here before you today. And I want to go way back to the 2000s. I studied engineering. I did a minor in cognitive science. I was fascinated by how the brain works and how the brain works in neural nets. And my favorite course was Systems Design 422, Machine Intelligence. And we had a chance to build very, very, very small backpropagating neural nets. This was the foundational technology for LLMs, but they were in the order of 200-300 nodes instead of 200-300 trillion nodes. And it was just a very, very, very different, obviously, experience. So that was sort of chapter 1. Chapter 2, I founded an organization called Engineers Without Borders. And we had, obviously, a social mission. We wanted to mobilize the engineering profession to help do what they could to contribute to eradicating world poverty. But what I quickly learned is as this organization took off and went from 100 to 500 to 1,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 people, most of my job was about culture, and it was about how to bring people along in this movement. I got some very clear feedback pretty early on, and it was sort of bluntly delivered to me that as an engineer, I sort of fit into the engineering stereotype that maybe my EQ was a little less than my IQ. Maybe if you asked them, it was a lot less than my IQ. And so I realized that if I was going to be able to help this organization achieve its mission, I needed to become a student of leadership. And if you looked at my bookshelf, you would have seen, all the classic books. Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Bob Keegan's work on adult development, Atomic Habits, anything that I could look to say, how could I apply lessons that other people have learned to my own life? And I began trying to bring that to other people. And the thing I very quickly realized is the thing that worked for me might not be the thing that worked for someone else. And so this is trite, but everyone probably has that profound moment when you realize, the thing that I've learned, my journey, I actually have to sometimes forget that and apply an experience from the person that I am working with, understand their journey, and be able to guide them. And so this idea of personalization, of how do we try to do this at scale? Because I was trying to talk to thousands of people a year. This question of scale was always on our mind. So those were a couple of themes. And in 2016, I remember there was a magazine article that came out in the New York Times. It was called The Future of, or The New World of Work. And their research was unequivocal that when teams come together, the driver of performance, and I want to focus on that word, the driver of performance is not the who that is on the team, but it is the how the team works together. And so that concept was sort of the founding idea of Valence, which is about how we work together, how we collaborate together, but to drive performance. And so for 5 years, we had these tools that really tried to help leaders, managers, understand themselves, understand their teams, understand the dynamics of their teams, and using digital tools, bring some of the best practices, these the stories, the examples from these books, bring them to life for leaders. And it was exciting, but we always knew there was something more. We were always sort of waiting for the technology to catch up to this vision of personalization at scale. And so as soon as the APIs, as soon as the publicly available large language models to do this reasoning emerged, we quickly knew that we had basically two paths and really only one path was the right path. The first path is just say, hey, this is going to be powerful. Let's add it on to our existing SaaS software system. Let's add it on to our existing mental model of how we have been building software, the problems that we've been trying to solve, which have really been narrow because the technology hasn't been powerful enough. And the second path, the path that we quickly decided was the only path that made sense, was to say, this technology is going to be the most transformative shift. And we have to reinvent ourselves as an AI-first company, because with that AI-first lens, the scope of possibility, the way of bringing new ideas into life is just an entirely new lens and mindset. And we need to go find the best AI leaders in the world, bring them together, and begin to solve some of the most challenging problems at work, which is, honestly, we all know that work can be really frustrating, that there's a lot of wasted effort. There's a lot of friction that happens in big companies. And we think fundamentally that AI can be applied to solve that. So this idea, we said, we're going to be AI first. We're going to build an incredibly powerful coach. And so in 2023, we launched Nadia. But when we kicked it off, the question that we kept getting asked was, would people even talk to an AI coach? Is that something that people would do? Obviously, that question's been answered unequivocally. All the research out there says people are more comfortable in some cases talking to AI than they are to humans. And by the time late 2024 came along, there was sort of this general sense that Valence had pioneered this category of trying to bring an AI coach into enterprise. Now, obviously, there's AI coaches everywhere. But our AI team has always been looking one step ahead. They've been looking one step ahead technically and looking one step ahead of what is the value that we can bring. And so last year, we partnered with folks who are in this room, people who are in the HR function, and asked, what are the questions? What are the things you're wrestling with? And there was really this belief that we could reinvent a talent cycle, a talent strategy, a talent management, performance management system that probably most of you feel is a little bit outdated, might not be the experience that you'd like to deliver to your managers, to your employees. And so there's this chance to reinvent it. And so our customization engineers, our solution engineers would work alongside you to say, how can we reinvent OKRs or goal settings or development conversations or performance management conversations or onboarding or your learning programs? And what we found over the course of 12 months of doing this is Nadia's moved from just an AI coach that can be offered to individuals to beginning to be almost a new talent management platform that should be able to bring the visions that you have to life in a much, much more personal way that makes it easier and faster and better for your employees to do those performance processes that are core to driving performance, to driving the productivity, but that have often felt like a box-ticking exercise or a heavier process than they need to. But the idea here is it's a bigger step. It is that to bring our workforces along in this journey that I think 2026, I think is going to be one of the most challenging moments for us as leaders as we try to help our workforces navigate this. One of the key things we need to do is try to put the most helpful and powerful and personal and augmentative AI into their hands. And as everyone who has a workforce knows, you're going to get a power law distribution. You're going to get some set of folks who are going to be the pioneers and are going to be pushing the boundaries. For the rest of us people, it's going to be a journey to try to help them build that fluency. And so we are actively trying to work to put this sort of proactive AI into employees' heads, not just to help them perform better, not just to help reduce some of the friction of how people work together, but also to help them make this transition to the new human plus AI era.
Awesome. Thank you for listening, everyone. My name's Anand Chopra-McGowan. I look after the Europe office for Valence, coming to you from London. And what you just saw there is a nice introduction to this notion of the frontier of AI and the front line of where AI is actually being deployed in the workforce. Parker's terrific. Now you're in for a real treat with Ethan Mollick Ethan is a professor at Wharton. Some of you may have read his book, Co-Intelligence. He's a widely read, one of the most prolific thinkers and authors in the space of the connection between AI and the workforce. Ethan's been a great supporter of Valence. He's come to a few of our sessions before. What he talks about in the video we're about to see is this idea that the real breakthrough isn't just better models, it is agents that can actually do meaningful work. And so that changes the conversation from and Parker talked about this as well, 2025 being, figuring things out, 2026 being really where we see value. And this move from experimentation to execution is very exciting. But there's also a risk, which is that leaders will fall into this ROI trap where we measure AI's impact by surface level adoption metrics. And what Ethan sort of challenges us is to stop, counting usage by the amount of output or slide decks or things like that, but really to look at how could we fundamentally rewrite the ways that our organizations work with this power of AI, right? So many of the things that we do in our companies are the result of processes that we built when we had constraints from what technology used to be. It's not necessarily the outcome that we want. And so the challenge that we now have is if we can really rethink with AI, it allows us to do things entirely differently from scratch. So Ethan will talk about this far more eloquently than I can. He'll also sort of talk about this notion that if you haven't built something that you previously felt was impossible, then you're not really at the frontier of AI. And this is an exciting kind of moment and challenge. So I'd encourage you to pay attention to this one. Ethan is a very fast speaker as well, so a warning there in terms of how quickly this session will go. But let's move over to hear live from Ethan Mollick now.
I mean, what's really interesting about any diverse organization is there's almost certainly some people in the organization using these tools as the most advanced users on the planet in whatever industry you're in. Because there's always curious people, there's people who get how AI works and start working with it, and often they're just not telling you that they're doing this, but like the most advanced users are actually inside organizations by and large, they're just doing it secretly. And so when I talk to these people, they're often very excited to tell me what they're building, and then you ask, who do you go to, and they have no idea who to talk to inside the company, or they're afraid to say anything anyway, because there's a policy from 2023 banning AI use that requires you to go to a council that then decides on the use case, and within 5 to 7 months, you'll get a hearing in front of the council, and then they'll end up buying a vendor product instead. So I see this happening, but it's happening at all sorts of levels at the same time.
And do you have an example or two of leaders that have guided that in ways that you think are the most positive?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting examples. So Nikolai Tangen, who runs the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the biggest pool of money on the planet, he overcame his risk managers basically and said we need to start using AI inside, and everyone gets access to ChatGPT Enterprise. And every meeting he asks how people are using these. He's told me that they've got that 50% of their office is now writing code, and only 20% of them are coders. Right? And so by asking and modeling use, you get big advantages there. I've also been pretty impressed by what's going on inside Walmart in their sort of corporate offices for a very large company doing the same thing. So I spent some time with them, and they're in a similar situation where they realize it's kind of a big deal, and there's a lot of really interesting experiments now happening all throughout the organization as they realize they have to figure out what agentic commerce looks like. And it's been interesting to watch the contrast with Amazon, where they sort of block any external agents, and Walmart's thinking about how to embrace them internally. And I think that those are really, there's a lot of things happening, but it has to come from the leadership level or it gets stuck.
Now, you mentioned another step change in the past 6 or 8 weeks. Those of us at Valence who are close to it feel the same thing. Might not have yet percolated to, folks who haven't been sort of on Twitter reading the, Karpathy posts. Do you want to showcase to us an example of sort of what's possible?
Sure. I mean, we can do a bunch of different stuff on what's possible. So let me tell you how we got here, and then I'll show you what's possible. Actually, we'll start with what's possible. Maybe we can throw it up on the screen here. So I have here, if I can drag it over. Did I lose it? Okay, hold on. So I've got a copy. I've got Claude Code running here locally, and I gave it access to a folder. So Claude Code, we'll go over this in a second, is basically an agentic AI system that can run on your computer. I gave it access to a folder full of fake information about an entire company's AI transition plan. And what I can do is actually point the AI at this, and I already did and said to it, what is this thing? And it's figured out, it's read all the files, and it's figured out that it's a, as you can see, a enterprise AI adoption package. And I can say, figure out, oops, let me switch over here, figure out any issues with the documents and any risks, and come up with a high-level strategy. Let's try and type live on my lap. High-level strategy presentation I can give to the CEO right now about risk-proofing this. And what I can just give it this instruction, it will go off, and it's going to figure out how to do this. And it can write to my files and read files and go online and invoke research agents I built and other stuff and just go do the work. And while we let this work, what I want to show you is, what I think the biggest step change is. So there's a couple pieces to this. The first of them is something, do you mind if I take a minute or two?
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of them is, I think the most important paper of last year, academic paper that I didn't write. I have to say, I've got, actually, it's more important than what I wrote, but I think it's fun to talk about. Okay, so this is a paper called GDP-Val, and I think I want to show you it because I think it's really interesting. What GDP-Val did was they brought in a bunch of people with an average of 12 years of experience, 14 years of experience in various industries, representing 5% of the US economy, and had them create complicated tasks that they do as their regular job. So I'll find a good one here let's pull something up interesting. Let's go, you can see the industries, concierges and customer service representatives and file and video editors. Let's look at finance here. Okay, so let's just take an example. So this is a typical one here. It's fall 2023, you're managing director of investment bank at a firm working on, this is a whole elaborate thing here, right? Like we have to be able to do our LATAM presence. So what they did was they took a task like this one, right? And we'll actually just copy this here. Here we can do this one here, or any of these others. We can choose any industry you want. Also, there's legal ones. There's all sorts of other stuff. And just for fun, we're going to throw that into ChatGPT. So we have it here, and I'll just throw that in while we talk. And what they did was they brought in people, the actual other experts, with 14 years experience to do these tasks. It took humans about 7 hours on average to do this kind of work. It took the AI 5 or 10 minutes. And then what they would do is they brought in a third set of experts as judges who'd blindly judge whether the products to see whether they were AI created or human created, whether they didn't know whether they're AI or human created. And they basically picked which one they liked best. And when this came out last summer, the best model was Sonnet 4.5. And we can watch it doing the work here. This is an agent at work here if you want to see it happen. And Sonnet won about 48% of the time. When GPT 5.2 came out this past summer, or this past December, it won 72% of the time, won or tied. And what that means is the way you should do work has changed pretty dramatically. There's actually a nice visualization of it, so I can show you that I've been tracking, which is the best thing for you to do now if you're doing work is that you should probably be, and this is the overall trend, by the way. This is the amount of time while we let everything run. I didn't update this morning when the new one came out, and we're now over 5 hours. But this is the infamous METR graph, which tells you the equivalent amount of human time task that the AI can do with 50% success rate. And now we're up to 72% success rate for similar tasks. And that means your best way of working with AI right now is for any intellectual task that you think the AI might be able to do that takes you more than a few hours, you should just assign the task to the AI and then check the work later. If it takes you an hour to check it, that's not a problem. You do it 2 or 3 rounds, and then even if it doesn't work out and you end up doing it on your own, the 28% of the time the AI fails, you'll still save 3 times as much effort and time as if you had done it yourself. And that's a pretty radical change, right? The fact that I autonomously give these tools the ability to go and just run and do things, and they do very long, very sophisticated tasks without further help. So we have this project underway, right, where it's looking at VC funding data in Latin America. We'll check back on those results, and let's see how Claude is doing in our other window. here. It looks like it is, it's building out the presentation for us, having read all of these files and done a deep audit of every document. So the real change is agents suddenly became real, and that's because their models have gotten better, and these harnesses, the systems the agents operate in, go better, and now you're actually getting to do real work with AI. And so it used to be a chatbot model. My whole book was about co-intelligence. You'd work back and forth with the AI, and that increasingly is not the model that we're following. It's almost a management or organization level model. And that's a big change.
So an individual doing work can produce a work output, and companies are about stringing together a series of those work outputs to achieve a bigger outcome. And we have an organization designed for humans to be able to make those connections. And we'll increasingly have a world where those connections can happen on their own. How is that transition happening, and are companies wrestling with that as well?
Okay, so what's really happening though is I don't think anybody's taking advantage of this. I mean, we're having this transition right now. You'll see this greatest in software. Like, if you talk to really good engineers, they're basically not touching code anymore. All the coders inside the major labs tell me that they're 100% using AI for all coding, and I believe them. And increasingly, the really smart coders, now that means it's an architecture decision, it's delegation, but how many of your organizations have started to think about what it means when somebody can write 100 times more code and it's giving code directions? Every one of those people, I guarantee you, is still in some sort of agile development sprint network where they have a 2-week stand-up meetings every day. What's your stand-up meeting? Claude did all the work today. It'll do all the work tomorrow. No blockers. What do you do with that? And I worry that people are not, the transition is inside organizations, and I just don't see people dealing with it. The best experiments I've seen companies pull a couple of best engineers off the line, put those people working with a subject matter expert and building a product in a day or two that used to take a team of 25 people 2 months.
And I think coding is sort of the canary in the coal mine, for lack of a better term. But the nub is that the human change processes to truly take advantage of the power of the technology are lagging considerably. Is that an issue? And how should folks in the room who are experts in this idea of change management wrestle with this?
So I think part of the problem is change management is often about accommodating changes by what the change is going to be, right? And so we're moving towards that. The idea that we're dynamically here's the AI 100% created pre-deck. And what I really liked about this was based on all the documents I had that threw together in HTML, and we can make it larger too, obviously. But I don't know if you caught this, by the way. One of the things that was fun about this was I just said I'm too lazy to open it, so just open the document for me because it can control my computer. It just opened my browser and launched this for me. So the ultimate laziness is just don't touch anything at all and just tell the AI what you want, and it email people, do all the work. Unfortunately, I don't have voice on, or that would be a problem. But we'll keep letting this build our fintech strategy while we're waiting. So I don't have answers for you. I think part of the problem is I'm showing you stuff here, like this is where things are heading. I do think that part of this is using AI to help manage that, right? So it's Naughty or other kinds of techniques. I think people don't trust the AIs enough to be smart about giving advice, smart about advising people individually, smart about helping you make decisions. So you tend to view this as like an IT technology. Like we have to implement this and then we have to get people used to the technology. This is not a static endpoint. And we're going to have to change how work operates. And I kind of also worry that a lot of executives are just abrogating the responsibility to do this. They're hoping someone will tell them. I get asked a lot, like, what is the best model for AI use? I'm like, the ones I see that are successful, mostly they don't want to tell you about it. And to the extent they're willing to tell you about it, it's not useful to you because they're changing how they operate in a way that is not a universal tool. So I think, change management, this is your responsibility in some ways. One of the biggest problems with AI is it gets put under IT a lot. I don't think this is an IT solution. I think it's an HR solution.
I've sometimes described the A in AI would be...
By the way, this is my standard slide on this, just so you don't think I'm making this up for you guys here in the room. I say HR is R&D now, so this is like a common
I want to come back to this because I think this is crucial. I've sometimes described the A in AI as actually another intelligence. It is another type of intelligence that we have to try to understand, and it's changing rapidly. And the more that we can understand that through interfacing with more powerful systems, the better we're going to be at guiding it. Do you think, is that a reasonable concept theory of mind of
Yeah, I mean,
theory.
I think it's a reasonable. I mean, there's some interesting caveats on that. Like being good at instructing the AI is a skill set we don't fully understand yet. Although it's weirdly a durable one. There's this great paper that just came out that found that AI agents actually basically increase inequality between your ability to give directions. So if you are good at, let's say this used negotiation agents and found that they amplified the variance between people. Because your agent is doing many, many negotiations. If it's not good at negotiating, you're going to lose out a little bit every time, and that'll be a multiplier effect. And actually, the demographics of the people involved, their experience with AI, all predicted how good their agents would be. Women turned out to be better at building agents than men in this study, even though in most studies with negotiation, women do worse than men for a variety of reasons. The women's negotiation agents outperformed men's agents, right? And we don't understand any of this yet. Like, we don't have theories for all of this. We don't know what's going on. But it's in a really interesting situation.
So can you go back to your slide, HR is the new R&D?
Sure.
And I want to, again, contrast sort of the R&D world is the frontier world. I would say that the world that many of the folks here in this room are facing is the ROI world. And they're being asked, it's the dollars and cents on the investment. And I would sure as heck say that if the concept is R&D, the immediate ROI is not a valuable ROI, or the first time SpaceX sent a rocket up that exploded, they would say, well, it's not worth doing it anymore because we got zero return on it. So how would you help make the argument or the conversation around R&D?
All right, so sorry about this, guys. Okay. All right. So here's my ROI slide. I don't think the ROI thing is as big a deal in most. I mean, I've seen the change happen in organizations pretty quickly. 6 months ago or 8 months ago, it was a big debate, that entirely fake MIT paper, which, did everyone know the 95% of projects fail paper, which is made up. It was 52 interviews at a conference done by one guy who's not really
MIT.
Who's lately MIT affiliated. It's insane that went viral with like people who are usually critical about stuff. But like people wanted this to fail, and I get it. It's really weird and strange, and it's But my colleagues have a tracking study at Wharton, and they're finding 75% of companies report positive ROI. I mean, I don't think it's the problem that it was before. My fear is it's a trap, though. Right, the ROI thing, for exactly the reasons you said, because ROI forces you to do this. This is my nightmare scenario for AI. Just here, let's pull up Club. While it's so frustrating. I have to wait minutes for it to do my work for hours. Okay, so I want to show you. This is my nightmare scenario here. All right, here we go. And this is my co-pilot, makes me nervous sometimes. Okay, so I write a memo based on this PowerPoint, then turn the PowerPoint to a memo, and then more PowerPoints, and it did that. And then I'm like, more PowerPoints, and it's let's go, and I get more PowerPoints. And then finally, I'm like, PowerPoints, I need more of them. And it gets very, very excited about this, and I now have 21 PowerPoints, right? And the thing is, like, you want more? And I stopped at this point. And like, they're good PowerPoints is the problem with them. And my fear is that if you aim for ROI, if you aim for productivity gains without thinking about organizations, you are going to drown in a sea of PowerPoints, right? And like, that's not what you want. You don't want PowerPoints. You want outputs. You want change. You want something else. And this is what concerns me when ROI becomes the goal and when it becomes how do we increase productivity, and you don't ask productivity for what. I can give you infinite work slop, right? Like PowerPoints I can generate on demand now, an infinite number of them. If that's what you're judging my performance on, if that's ROI to you, is like more PowerPoints per minute, I think you're in trouble.
So it automates the tasks that have been designed in an old world of work versus the investment you need to rethink.
Right. The kindest version of this is we needed this PowerPoint for some reason. The unkind version of this is nobody knows why you need this PowerPoint, right? Like, and that happens in lots of organizations. A lot of what's designed in organizations is contingent and weird. My most depressing story about this is I even before AI, I spoke to somebody who was at a very large company, and her job was with a team of 14 people to produce this report every week. It was a compliance report. And during COVID, she couldn't produce the report, but it was important enough that they kept the whole team together. But she started to have this suspicion in her mind, and after she returned back to the office, they started producing the report again. And for the last year and a half, at the time I'd spoken to her, she hadn't sent the report to anyone because she just was curious if anyone actually used it. No one had ever asked. So she had this 14-person team producing a report. every week, and they were often like scrambling to do it, and there was this whole like, winters are always the toughest for the report, and nobody cared, and nobody knew what it was there for or anything else. And I really worry that if the goal was the PowerPoint, what part of the system are you part of? So it's not just change management of like, okay, I need to think about how AI does stuff. It's not just change management in terms of thinking, okay, what's worth doing? It's also, we have to go back and think about why we're doing the things we're doing. Like, is there value in that? Is it an interim process? What was the human need anyway?
And why is that so hard for organizations to grasp that and invest in that?
Because organizations aren't designed, right? Or they think they're designed, and then as soon as you look at them, you realize they're grown, right? They're evolved. There's parts of the organization, like they respond to environmental stresses, and they don't, anyone who actually looks at the organization as is, the org chart doesn't tell you that much of the story of an organization, right? And so going through that requires managers to think hard about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I think that, it's this trap at every level of the organization that requires actual leadership. So like, for the people in the room, this is your moment, not just because HR is R&D, but because we have this blockage about how we incentivize people, how we reward people, how organizations work, that we have to guide people out of this mess. And the only way to do that is with the kind of HR leadership that is the center of things.
And so, final question on adoption in the workplace. What would your hope be end of 2027 for the folks in this room, for the progress they were able to make in having AI adopted across their workforce?
So I think you have to stop counting adoption as percent of people who've touched your AI systems. I think you're making a very bad mistake that way, especially if you have bad AI systems. I have actually talked to one very, very large company where I talk to the senior manager all the time, and they're telling me and they're doing all kinds of really cool AI stuff. And I had a junior mid-level manager in my class, and she told me, yeah, we have to do 90% of our work with AI, so all we're doing is summarizing every meeting in Copilot, because there's no other instructions how to do it, and we have to hit our metric, and that's the metric. And I think that if you're not starting to open up that stuff, the reward system, opening up the metrics, you're in trouble. You have to turn your team into R&D people. And that means you can't just check off AI use, increased productivity 17%, more slide decks than ever. Like, these are real problems you have to deal with. And I think that I'd like to see you have much more interesting metrics in KPIs than X percentage of people use this, or we've produced X more lines of code. If you don't have innovations, if you haven't built an impossible thing, and I'm not joking, you should be building impossible things. And also, if you haven't jettisoned at least one thing that was critical to your organization, everybody could do this now for something. What is that thing? Stop doing it. And by the way, one place where I can see the biggest implications is L&D and mentoring. Like, you've got to, mentoring at scale now, that changes stuff. If you haven't changed how your organization works when you have mentoring at scale, something is wrong, right? That changes how your talent pipeline should work. If you think Nadia and other products like that can do the mentoring you need to do. But also, talent acquisition, just doing stuff around the edges that are like, we have a better slide deck or a better L&D. I do teaching and training all the time. We would build products that were, educational simulators that took a 14-person team and a couple $1 million a couple years to build, and we literally threw the instruction manual that we built for that game into the AI, and it rebuilt the entire game from scratch in an afternoon with no additional prompting. Like, you should be thinking much more ambitiously.
So I love that. Build impossible things, jettison critical things.
Yes.
And if you haven't gotten either of those two, probably on a monthly basis, you're not close enough to the frontier. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Ethan. We deeply appreciate it.
Okay, everyone. For those who could keep up with the pace of Ethan, I hope you took away something exciting and inspirational from that. This notion of HR being R&D, the next couple of sessions that we're going to run are ways to really prove that out and give you a sense of how some HR leaders are really seizing that role. In this next session, we'll hear from senior HR leaders at Cushman & Wakefield, Corning, and then also Larry Emmond. Larry runs the largest CHRO community in the world for large companies. And these are not just leaders who are experimenting and piloting and things. They're really rethinking how work and learning and leadership can operate at scale when you bring AI into the picture. And it goes exactly to this point that that Ethan was just making, it's not just about how do we automate the PowerPoint, or how do we get the report to be faster. It actually allows that they're actually rethinking from scratch. So listen to how they're thinking about democratizing AI coaching, but then also embedding this coaching practice and this AI tool into performance, learning, and leadership workflows. These are companies that have been deploying our AI coach, Nadia, for quite some time, and they've learned a lot about what it really takes to make it successful. One of the important signals also to listen for is they're not just looking at AI coaching as just a tool. They're really thinking about it as infrastructure on top of which they can truly reinvent what their workforce does. So this is bigger than just deploying a new thing. And again, to echo Ethan's point about it's not just about touching a tool and sort of using a thing every now and then and sort of meeting some arbitrary KPIs. It's really about reimagining the kind of workflows and experiences that our employees have. So over to our three panelists to have that conversation.
We're moving into a world where AI is potentially going to be employees, agents, impacting organizations heavily. There's, as we saw from Ethan this morning, the pace of technological change is very rapid. Can organizations keep pace with that change as you're managing not just people, but also AI? Can we make sure we do that so that it's not only like cost cutting and productivity, but delivering value in other ways? And so we'll delve into a bunch of those topics. I think maybe to start, for Holly and Jordana, as you head into 2026, what are some of the focuses related to AI that your organizations are running? Do you have any big, important initiatives that you're pursuing? And I don't know, maybe Jordana, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So right before I left Corning, we were doing the strategic planning for the year. And so we had been early adopters of Nadia, of Corning GPT, which was ChatGPT brought in-house. And so last year was our year, I would say, of experimentation and piloting and getting some comfort with it. And this year was gearing up to be one in which we would take on some bigger, larger pieces of work from an agentification standpoint on the business side to expedite, I would say, revenue and profitability in some of our bigger growth businesses. And from an HR side, we were really thinking about, okay, how do we now augment the tools we have, right, like Nadia, to kind of put it across all avenues of HR and talent management, et cetera. And then also, how do we create a more fertile ground for all of our people to really embrace capability with AI, beyond just the dabbling of, hey, can you ingest this data and give me some insights? How do we help them start to know how to create GPTs, how to create mini flows of work, et cetera? So that was the focus going into this year for Corning.
Okay, great. And Holly at Cushman & Wakefield?
Yeah, I think we've kind of got two approaches we're taking. One is we're launching and learning and experimenting on a lot of AI things, particularly around, in our commercial real estate world, a lot of what we do is pretty heavily administrative, like lease. You think about a real estate lease, it's 100 pages long, right? So using the AI capabilities to do lease abstractions, to help people monitor and manage all of the different real estate portfolios that companies have. So really using that as an augmenting tool to do the work. And then on the HR side, obviously, Nadia, maybe not obviously, but Nadia is a big initiative for us that we are doing. And individuals are using AI to help them experiment. We're a Copilot house, but we also have folks, I'm a Claude user, and we're encouraging folks to utilize prompting and building those capabilities on prompting. And then we are preparing really heavily for the launch of agentic AI. Particularly, HR is actually going to be the first piece in the organization to move to agents. And so a lot of the work that we're doing, we're launching and learning on the AI side, and we are significantly prepping on the agent side, particularly when it comes to talent and culture and governance, to make sure that we are anticipating a whole bunch of different scenarios and being prepared for that.
Okay, that's great. It sounds like really a like real maturation, right? From maybe some like smaller things, experiments, to a bunch of like key use cases that are driving a lot of value. And I feel like the agentic might link to, Larry, what you've seen. So you kind of meet with CHROs all the time, with big groups. You were at Davos recently. So tell us what you're maybe seeing, not just for one company, but
just
across.
a little context. For about a decade, I've been building. I lead one of the largest big company CHRO clubs in the world. It's crazy to say this, but it wasn't until April of 2023 in a meeting in Zurich with global manufacturing CHROs that the Schneider Electric CHRO, Charisse Lee, said, is anybody playing with this generative AI thing? And they're like, Larry, who's the crazy lady? Like, what is she talking about? That was less than 3 years ago. First time AI ever was verbalized. So since then, I've done about 90 meetings, and we've had AI and HR in every meeting. You know right away, if it's a single company one, you know right away, they're one of two groups. If they've gone down the road with one agent like Nadia, they can't wait to hear about the other agents. Oh my God, we're going to do that one. It's great, right. But most of the time, you realize within 5 minutes, first of all, I think you have witchcraft. Companies that should know, what is this craziness that you're doing? And then immediately it's like, oh, but the data and the leaning out. So if you either go in early or you don't, and there's really nobody in the middle right now. And it's just going to be fascinating to see where that goes. The ins or the outs.
And what
the outs are more than you think.
If I could just add on to that, a little personal story. I've always been a personal fan of strategic procrastination. So I'm a personal story, but it kind of frames how I've approached things in business. I'm an identical twin. And when we were babies, my sister walked first, and I just kind of sat and watched. And when I say she walked, she toddled, she fell, she stood up, she fell, and I just kind of sat and watched. And then my parents were worried, like, oh my gosh, Holly's not walking, right? And then about 3 weeks later, I'm like, all right, I got up and I walked across the room, and then I was running before my sister was, right? So it's one of those, there is value in being a fast follower. There is value in kind of letting others be on the bleeding edge and take the wounds. My hypothesis is that AI is going to change all of that. I think those who are on the sidelines, as you see that bifurcation, I believe, and it's changed my point of view, because I think if we are procrastinating too long, the world is going to be changing so fast, it's going to be really hard to keep up or catch up.
I had one CHRO, German, who became CHRO of a big French company. That alone is going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she told me, she was like, you're going to do it. It was back in July. They're going to whine like this. And I said, when they do, I want you to tell them, why are you people whiners? I'm like, I don't know if this is going to go very well, but I did. And it did work. I caught them off guard at first, but she asked me to do it, right? I said, if this is all impossible, why are all these famous big global companies 2 years into this? It's not impossible.
Then within this AI landscape, like where does AI coaching specifically fit into your strategies? Maybe first for Holly.
Oh, sure. I think that this is going to be, it already is starting to be, a huge unlock for large global companies. Our company, Cushman & Wakefield, we've got about 54,000 people, 60 countries. And we all know people join good companies, they leave bad managers, right? How do you learn to be a good manager? You work for a good manager. If you haven't worked for a good manager, Godspeed, right? So, and with what Nadia is doing, is actually incorporating all of the information that all of the best practices have, and using it to help inform people who've never done this stuff before. So I think it's a huge democratization. We've got about 10,000 managers, and I can't wait for them all to be using it at the point in time. And I think that's a big piece. But one is the language capability. Thrilled about that. I'm going to be piloting it or showcasing it at our European sales conference on Wednesday, and we're going to have our head of Germany actually do it in German and then switch to English. So it better work.
It'll work.
We're doing it live on stage. But there's something I think really powerful about being able to have that information and role play it in that moment. Your hypothesis that soon Nadia is going to know your people better than you are. I fully agree with that. Like, well, last time you talked with Joe versus Sally, you know, Sally got upset and Joe was okay. So now let's role play how Sally's going to take this news versus Joe, right? And so there's something super, super powerful about giving managers who've never really maybe seen what good looks like, not only knowledge of what should be approached, but a practice in the moment of how it can be approached, and then feedback to make that happen right before they go into that conversation or whatever it is. I think that we're already seeing it be fantastic. One other little example is, you know, I mentioned we're a co-pilot shop, and you know, we're doing our own change management within the organization for adoption of Nadia, say versus co-pilot, right? And our values as a company, the acronym we use is DRIVE, so driven, resilient, inclusive, visionary, and entrepreneurial. So it's DRIVE. And so we did a little test. You went to co-pilot and said, I'm going into a conversation. I want to make sure I'm coaching Jordana on how to best exhibit the DRIVE values. And co-pilot came back, and this isn't to bash co-pilot, but came back with how to find something on a drive, like on a computer drive. I was like, nope, that's not it. But Nadia was like, all right, well, here's what you can talk to her about entrepreneurial and inclusion. So it just really the institutional knowledge that she absorbs and learns and then feeds back is, I think it's going to be a huge game changer for our capabilities across managers. It already is.
That's great. And Jordana, what are you? How do you see AI coaching fitting in?
You know, when we were first approached by the group, it seemed like an amazing opportunity to democratize coaching and to have at scale this ability that you really only could have for a certain amount of people before, right? And very high quality in your own language, excellent. But soon, as we started to pilot it, there was an aha moment where we also realized, oh my gosh, this is actually taking away the fear of AI and agents for our entire workforce. They are loving it. In fact, one of our engineers, when we took away from the pilot, said that one, he was glad because his wife kept asking, who's Nadia, that he did not. But he was also really upset and wanted to know when it would come back because Nadia was his new best friend, right? So, and this was I'll just say, a very prickly engineer that we have. It's the reason we put him in the pilot group. So we started to realize, hey, you have this twofold thing now. You have this great coaching, and you have this ability to, I guess I'll say, soften the change resistance and get people comfortable. Okay, that was phase one of my learning journey. So I was watching people walk and learning to walk, and now let's talk about running a little bit. So phase two was the realization that, okay, well, actually, now that we can train Nadia to emphasize some of our values or to enable certain things that we want to, at scale, start introducing in the organization, it came the quick realization that Nadia could be a super business partner for us, consistently, all languages, real time, reinforce the things that we would normally have to distribute through each individual business partner, and with varying results based on their capability, right? So not necessarily replacing per se, but amplifying and creating a better capability there. So it's a huge change piece. And the third sort of element of the journey was the realization that, well, when you really think about that, do we need all these processes that we have today when you have a different set of tools and technology available to you? So performance appraisal, for example, yes, we could design it, and this year probably the team will be designing it to do amazing performance appraisal, and they will be so much better than in the past. But will it have done that much more on what the actual objective is, which is to develop people? Or if we took a blank sheet approach and said, well, if we have this tool and this capability, how do we really want to design the process to show actually customized development of people? So the third journey in the kind of development phase is this aha about, for any process, but HR particularly, you can start asking yourself, do I need to question everything about this process and strip it back to the basics of what is my intent, what is the simplest way to get there, and how can I design it in this new amazing world? And we have an onus and a responsibility as people, resource practitioners, HR leaders. Most of us probably went in for that purpose-driven world of wanting to amplify people's capability, of making sure that as part of that development, that we are including AI skills and capability at a much faster and more progressive and aggressive rate than we currently are, right? So also thinking about how can we use this tool and others to create much greater capability and understanding about the utilization of AI going forward. We owe that to people not only because it will create more value for the world, but we owe that to people so that they keep pace with this change and they have the ability to change and move into and morph into the roles of the future.
One of their clients you saw probably earlier was GXO Logistics, 200,000 employee logistics firm. And the CHRO is a German who lives in Copenhagen, offices out of London for a US company, like beautiful post-COVID stuff. Talked like in October, she called me, I got a great story. I go, what? They had already rolled out Nadia to a few thousand managers, and she had a new CEO coming in. Had met him in the interview process, but she's got her first big meeting, couple weeks, and she's like, I'm gonna try Nadia for this. So she starts talking to Nadia, tell me about the CEO, and then they start role-playing, and she spent a bunch of time, and so she has the meeting. And she goes, it's like the greatest first meeting you could ever have with a new CEO. And she goes, there's no way that happened without Nadia. So I know Chris. I guarantee you she walked out of the room and she was waiting. And nobody's looking around and go, Nadia, sister, I can't tell you this went, right? So anyway, in the holidays, we always text. And in the holidays, we're checking in. And I said, hey, you continue to use Nadia? And she said, yeah, every day. I said, I got a question. Could you ever imagine using a human coach again? And she just said, why would I do that? Nadia is so much better at every aspect of it. And I'm sure she now tells that story. Now right, Jennifer, now you're talking the CHRO of a 200,000 company sharing with the company that she uses Nadia every day, and it helps her be a better leader, right? And I think you're gonna have more and more and more and more of that, and that's gonna be maybe the ultimate impact all the way down to the front line.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And let's keep going up, because we wanted to talk a bit about the role of the CHRO and HR as it relates to the board and the senior most leadership of the organization. And just like, what role should HR play in helping the board of large companies know how to kind of select, deploy, utilize AI? And I don't know, whoever wants to jump in first.
Sure. So actually, we have a new board chair, which is kind of really exciting. He's just come from Blackstone, and so for those of you who know the head of HR at Blackstone, she's phenomenal, and so he's coming with this mindset of what best companies do, which is so nice. So the expectations are, let's actually talk more about culture and talent and how we are reacting, responding, and proactively planning for a world of AI. And that's everything from governance, risk, and culture, and organization implications. And so bringing those conversations into the boardroom to basically pressure test the guiding principles that we are arriving at. We haven't not yet arrived at them. We're doing all the right, really methodical, very quickly, but methodical questions and answers on, all right, well, when the agents replace a particular role in whole, are we going to just bring that all the way down to the bottom line? Are we going to, how much of that is going to just go to EBITDA? How much of that is going to be redeployed to invest in growth? Like any portfolio strategy, right? It's maximizing whether debt pay down and invest for growth or whatever your challenges are, utilizing this capability as a portfolio rebalancing and not actually just going directly to, oh, we're going to actually just cut costs, but really focus it on growing and building insights. In the real estate world, we gain competitive advantage through insights. So if we have more capabilities for insights, each of the people in our organization can have more productivity, which means that they can interact with more clients, which drives more revenue. So having that whole big picture. And then on the culture side, it's making sure that we are bringing the conversation into the boardroom on who do we want to be and who are we, and making sure that the decisions that we're making on execution of our strategy and utilization of AI keeps all of those whole. So this is where we're going to be, but our drive values and what our vision and our purpose is as an organization, pressure testing how we are applying this new capability against, are we still demonstrating who we want to be as an organization? So those conversations are just starting, and I'm excited that we've got the right level of governance and focus at the board level and at our executive committee level.
And I think if you boil it down and distill it, everybody's got a unique business, right? So if you're the board, you're asking from a standpoint of your stakeholder management, right, your investors, is this big trend going to disrupt anything in your core way of making business, your competitive advantage, or is it going to create some sort of disruption? So that's the first thing, right? And then the second piece might be, okay, for customers, are you taking advantage of this then, kind of tangential to that, to enhance value creation, so we create greater loyalty, greater profitability, blah, blah, blah. And then from employees and culture, is it sustainable from a stakeholder manager? How are you sustainably approaching this, right? Which has some tail into, obviously, productivity comes into all of that, but much more around sustainability. Are you getting ahead of this concept of where you're going so that you can proactively apply and minimize people disruptions too, which hurts the reputation of the company if you're not doing right. So the thing for HR is it's an incredible moment, CHRO is an incredible moment, obviously, to show up first and foremost as that business leader and partner, thinking about it with your CEO and other members of your exco around, hey, the board's thinking about it this way, we need to be able to answer it in this way, my view. But secondly, I think it's an incredible moment to amplify, as you're saying, your values and who you are, and to tie it to that as you're having this conversation about then how does that tie to the way that we work and our culture and who we are. So it's a pivotal moment for sure, like any disruptive trend is, but this one happens to be sitting a little bit more squarely in the people side. So as said before today, it's not an IT tech thing, it's actually a people resources thing, people and culture thing, as well as obviously a business thing. So how do you grab that and really have those conversations, lead those conversations and the structure of those conversations with your exco for the board?
You know, with the board and the executive committee, there's a book out there that's very popular right now called The AI-Enabled Leader or something like that. You don't have to read it because it has one point. The point is, if you're a senior leader, you got to play with the tools yourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I would try to do with board members, is I would find a way to try to hook them into using Nadia themselves, using this agent, like something you built for your company that's out of Copilot Studio. Get them to engage and use it. These are sharp people. And they just might not yet have played with the agents themselves. And once they do, they'll get it right away. I think it'll move quickly when we get the most senior people to use it, you know?
I mean, what I love about that is it feels very doable, actionable, right? There's like a lot of complexity here, but that is a pretty easy action item. Yeah. We're, okay, the hook is coming out for us shortly. But what if we do a final? We've got an audience. I mean, it's like mixed, but a lot of senior HR folks. Like, what would be your piece of advice for this audience thinking of this kind of human plus AI era and all that we've been seeing and talking about today? So advice for this audience, human AI era.
I think, we were talking about leaning in. I think this is a key moment, as Georgina mentioned. I think this is a key moment for almost all organizations in terms of managing through ambiguity. And they say the number one competitive differentiator for CEOs is their ability to manage ambiguity. And I think it's our time as heads of HR to help sculpt the fog, to help create tangibleness in what can be a very intimidating change, which is why I just play with it. It's really not hard, right? So bringing tangible examples and helping lay the groundwork for people to navigate this, what could be an intimidating time of change, but lean into it and have fun. Yeah, don't be a strategic procrastinator.
Great.
Yeah, there's so many smart people in this room who've got great advice back for everyone, right? So I think that's the thing. Just keep speaking to everybody and hearing what's going on and then thinking about how you want to apply and drive it. And echoing what everybody else here said, just jump in. I mean, we're all figuring it out. So have some fun, unleash your inner child, all that curiosity and creativity, and get in there.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for staying with us. I know it is a bit of a unique experience to be watching panels that are happening live, but the banter in the chat is fantastic, and please keep the questions coming for myself and the team. This next panel is, I think it really brings together this concept of like the frontier and the front line. So I had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of our clients, Tina from Schneider Electric, Tim Horgan from the Home Depot. And what what we're working through with both of those organizations is like, how do we get AI into the hands of who historically have been the technology have-nots in an organization? And when we think about Valence, like our thesis has always been, how do we democratize the experiences that the most senior leaders in the house have? And that feels even more important now. When you look at the census for America, 60% of people who are employed are working in hourly jobs. These are not the roles that all of us who are joining webinars during the day can relate to. And the worry that I think a lot of people have and a lot of economists have is that as this AI technology becomes so important, as more kind of like salaried people become very like facile with these tools, what about the rest of people? So what we're working on right now is, for example, in Home Depot stores, getting Nadia into people's hands such that they can solve like the really hard problems at work. Like not just, hey, I have a deliverable, I'm working on a project over the next 3 months, but literally like there's a customer be combative to my team and it's upsetting for them. Like, how can I help them have the resilience to deal with this really hard job that we have? It's exciting times, and I should wrap it up and turn it over to the panel. So thank you all for having joined us through this.
Parker talked this morning about the frontier and the front line. And I think that so often in our roles in offices, in front of computers, even when we don't mean to, we gravitate so much to thinking about the jobs of professionals and the days of professionals. And we think so much about those leaders and our succession pipelines. And what we're really excited to talk about here is the front line. I looked it up really quickly on ChatGPT, of course. And in the Fortune 1000, 60% of the people employed, you'd kind of classify as an hourly wage earner. So be that someone in the Home Depot, be that someone on a manufacturing line, in a distribution center, a nurse, a restaurant worker, and those are, employed roles, not talking about gig workers, et cetera. But what we really want to talk about is how are we bringing the power of AI to these people who have traditionally not been able to get this type of personalized development, personalized coaching, and more often than anything, just like personalized support in really tough moments that they endure in what are probably tougher jobs than any of us have ever had. So very excited, and maybe we'll kick off a little bit with the Home Depot. And Tim, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the culture at the Home Depot, and why I now know the obvious answer was that we wanted to pilot in the stores.
So first of all, like most of us, we think of servant leadership. And at Home Depot, the servant leadership model is the inverted pyramid. And at the top of the inverted pyramid is our customer base, and then followed by our frontline associates. We think the most critical management position in the company is the next tier. So as you're going down the pyramid, it's that frontline leader that is in a unit, and they're probably the only manager in the unit when they're on duty. So picture we had 500,000 associates, 90%, but so much better than the 60, if you will, are frontline associates. And so you start thinking about, I've got 50,000 people in a leadership model that I need to touch in a way that lets them reflect the appropriate leadership dynamics in line with our culture. And the challenge is, how do you train 50,000 people? We bring people into Atlanta, that's where the corporate center is. And we don't call it a corporate center, by the way, we call it the store support center, because our job is to support that front line. And so they would come to the store support center. We would put a group through a cultural immersion 3-day program. Well, think how many people can I do that to in a year? Not 50,000, maybe 2,000. So where we got excited, and right before I left, I actually introduced Nadia to the team, and I said, this is scalable. It's something that I could ensure that each frontline leader had a tool in their hand to which they then could understand, what do I do in this situation?
And Tina, Schneider Electric took the opposite approach, and you're kind of thinking about it from the other point of view. And maybe share a little bit about how you and Charisse are thinking about what you've learned from rolling out Nadia to the salaried professionals, and what might be possible when you think about, I think you said, what was your percentage that are in frontline roles at Schneider Electric?
We have around 12,000, 13,000 managers overall, and then of those frontline, it's almost half, right?
Okay.
We're 160,000 employees, and we're all over the world, a third in the Americas, a third in Europe, a third in Asia. It's a French headquartered company. For us, distribution centers, plants, even in the Americas, we have over 100 plants. Those plant managers will be critical in really getting augmented support in the form of Valence. And just to step back a little bit, part of our overall people transformation is indeed about this notion of leader as coach. It's not a new notion. I think many of you guys have practiced it. You've talked about servant leadership, Tim, which has some parallels to it. But the whole idea is shifting command and control, even at a very efficient supply chain factory environment, from command and control to more coaching, learning, skilling. And here, an AI leadership coach plays a really nice complement to that mission.
Yeah. And one of the things I'd love for both of you to answer, maybe Tim, we'll start with you, is, you know, when you think about what are the challenges that these leaders who are in stores managing hourly workforces, I think you said that people are at 4:30 a.m. to get the store ready, they go through midnight. What does that day-to-day look like, and what do they need from a coach? Because it's so different from what someone who's managing a bunch of professionals would need. And I think the point that I want to make is that we are so excited about AI, and I want to remind everyone how tailored it can be and how much we can think about these unique roles that people have and make sure that the AI application that's being put in their hands is really, really, really built to their context and their challenges. So Tim, maybe share a little bit about what that looks like and why we were so excited for Nadia to be able to help with some of those challenges.
Sure, glad to. So we run 24/7, 365. The store opens at 6 a.m. and closes at 10 for the customer, and then after 10, we recover the store. So 2,500 stores, probably another 250 distribution centers that are also running at that level. So with that backdrop, there's usually one manager on duty, and I'm going to paint a scenario to say it happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is mid-shift for the night crew. An associate gets in an argument with another associate. And then there's physical altercation. Now, the manager in that case has probably got 2 years' experience. They've probably never had a fight in the receiving area. They also had a late truck that showed up, and so the freight came in late. They also had 2 people call out on the night crew. So they have to figure out, do they run overtime or not? By the way, the store's going to open at 6 a.m. whether they fix it or they don't fix it. So that's the situation that you've got an assistant manager in, and they go, well, I'll call my boss. Not many bosses are up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And if they are, you probably don't want to talk to them. Just saying. There's no HR partner available. So what are they going to do? You say, well, I hope they go to the office and pull up the SOP, and then look. You're going, these guys are fighting in the room. So the immediacy of the issue, and to me, that's where we think of coaching on a much bigger scale. It's the immediacy of the issue. You have to be able to say, here's what you do. And by the way, it's aligned with SOP. It's aligned with our culture. It also reduces risk. So it's following all the appropriate procedures that we would hope they would follow. That is probably the most effective use of a coach in the minute. And if they don't deal with that effectively, there's no way they're going to be thinking about how do I grow my career? How do I develop skills to move to the next level? They've got an immediate situation that they have to deal with. And there's hundreds of those. Associate walks past a customer on the floor and doesn't say, can I help you? Which we don't ask them to do that. We say, what are you working on? It's open-ended, closed-ended questions, right? So what happens when you ignore that customer? So I'm a manager. Again, I'm 2 years in the job. I probably just got promoted from that cadre of associate. So this is a person I may know. I see it happen. Do I address them? And how do I address them? A, do I turn and run because I'm afraid? Right? Do I go up and say, what the hell are you doing? You know that's not how we do things. Or do you say, Nadia, what should I do? And if you can get in the moment, real-time coaching, can you imagine the dynamic it changes for that interaction? But more importantly, from a business standpoint, now that associate feels coached effectively, they will engage the customer next time, and then I look for a lift in sales. And just by dynamics, a 1%, we have a close rate at Home Depot somewhere around 60%. That means the number of people come into the store that come in 100%, 60% actually buy something, 40% leave. You may not have known that. A 1% increase is worth $1.5 billion in top-line sales. If I can get that associate engaged and excited about connecting with a customer the next time, by the way, we do 20,000 transactions per week per store. So I have the opportunity to do somewhere around 35,000 transactions. Just think if I just get one more transaction, 1% lift. So that's why we got excited. And when we first started talking about Nadia, it gives me a scalable tool to be able to do that. And that's what we're excited about.
For me, as I've learned the year and a half that we've done this with the office managers or leaders, couple things, pretty straightforward, but I really want to take to the plant managers. Yeah. One is definitely use case, right? So we learned when we first rolled out Valence, it was kind of a free-for-all, so it was fun, everyone was experimenting, but it wasn't until we started to feed the LLM with some of this Schneider-specific things, company values, leadership expectations, and then use cases. And we saw, and this morning was great because there were so many data-filled examples. You need the data to be able to build your case, right? It's the AI, it's the HI, the human intelligence, plus the data that makes this ecosystem work. So a lot of what we did was learn from the data also when we had performance management time, when we had career conversation time, you saw the spike and the usage of those use cases. So we want to bring that to the plant managers in the shop floor. The other thing I think, and I'm not sure most of you will agree, but we have been on this binge of digital and AI training. I can't even tell you how many promptathons we've been running around the company. Like, I'm exhausted by them. And we already know promptathons and prompting is in some way not fully obsolete, but getting there. One of the things our plan, at least for the blue collar, the plant managers with tools like not only Valence and AI Coach, but other things, is also to make sure that upskilling, because we're all about really materially, what are you building, what are you learning, how can you apply into your jobs, how can you expand your roles. So we're hoping that use of something like an AI coach is the best way to really build digital and AI skills versus classroom prompting, everyone going at once. The last thing, just a little plug, a big piece, and half of my role is on the DEI inclusion space. And so the equity and access to things like that is super important, right? So really making sure, and people spoke earlier about democratization, if AI used responsibly, right, and with that power comes that great responsibility to repeat Uncle Ben or Uncle Bill in Spider-Man, I think that really makes a difference. And whether you do it with a smaller population pilot first, but like Tim, what you guys are doing en masse, I think that's super important, both in terms of the cultural message you want to send, and also the upskilling across all the levels of manager or employees even.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And what you said about integrating the culture is so critical.
Yes.
That how would you make a decision in line with the corporate values?
Right.
Or the purpose of the company. So I agree 100%.
And I know both of you in your talent roles, Tim especially, have talked about this, has gotten pressure from the CFO and the CEO around how are we going to prove the ROI on this and when are we going to see ROI. And as we go to these larger, these really deep populations where they do have such a big impact on the bottom line, and there's an argument, well, if we're teaching them a new skill and we're taking them away, how do we balance this? And I wonder, how would you both articulate to your peers as well as other executives, how do you think about the ROI of enabling those frontline managers? And Tim, I mean, you just spoke to the lift, but Tina, maybe if you want to talk about that in the manufacturing environment as well.
It's a sensitive topic, and it's a hard conversation right now, and I don't want to sugarcoat it too much, saying, oh, we don't worry about workforce productivity or efficiency. We do talk about it, and there are expectations from the management, and there are use cases going on now as we speak in certain areas, and you guys all know them, some in supply chain, some in finance, accounting, some in marketing, some in HR. We are experimenting with that. We are working on certain methodologies and looking how AI can actually augment or replace or supplement, right? Human to bot to agent kind of processes. We are learning, we're experimenting, but just to kind of address the elephant in the room, at least for us, I can't speak on your behalf, that is something in terms of ROI, i.e. workforce productivity, FTE, efficiencies that the management and the board are interested in.
Yeah.
So we don't move away from it. We're trying to productively do it. It's a French company. Works councils are super interested in that topic. So let's just say it's there. But at the same time, I think we tell the strategic narrative and some of the things that we're doing also about really enhancing impact, enhancing productivity, not just for efficiency, but augmenting, right? So all the things we talk about. And we have really cool use cases on that. We're in the energy tech space. It's a very dynamic, interesting space. Our business has grown a ton because of data centers, right? We make the cooling, we make the software supporting that growth. So that, by definition, as with all industries, is just changing every day. So that value proposition of AI helping people upskill, reskill, is not only just blah, blah, it's real. And I think it can complement the same conversation about workforce productivity and efficiencies.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's tough. If our founder was a guy named Bernie Marcus, and Bernie said, if you take care of the people, they'll take care of the customer, and everything else takes care of itself. Our CFO did not go to the school that Bernie taught that message in. Go figure. So with him and with the, being financially responsible, it's like, okay, what kind of return? And it's hard to point to the return. So, pragmatically, there is no number I can show this store did X and therefore this was the outcome. But what you can show is what are some of the use cases and what are the costs of not doing it. 90% of the time you follow the rule, 10% of the time you make judicious exceptions. This is the right time to do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think empathetically, that's where Nadia could really add value. So when I think financial results, I can point to cases where management failure led to real costs. I could point to opportunities that if we have better leadership where I could drive volume, and then there is a trust factor that you have to go with.
We talked a lot about adoption and implementation and a lot of why, and no shame, Tina, a lot of why we start with our office populations. It's a little bit easier. Everyone is already sort of fluent with technology. They can use Nadia and other AI applications on their computers. And, from a systems perspective, everyone's pretty homogenous at that level. You've got Microsoft ecosystem and a laptop. When we get down to the front lines, we're dealing with so many different pieces of technology, right? But all of these different modalities, people don't have access, and it is a real challenge. So maybe can both of you speak to why it is worth going through that challenge to make sure that we're not leaving the front line as AI have-nots? Why is it so important right now for all of these organizations represented here, the leaders, to make sure that these populations get the same type of experience and access to best-in-class AI?
I guess for me, and again, I would say it's beyond the Nadia, right? This is more about digital and AI access. Back to my kind of head of DEI role as well. It is about equity and leveling the playing field and equal chance for growth. Now, growth, and Tim and I talked about this at lunch, skills may not be the same kind of growth in terms of what happens after that in a plant shop floor environment where you're non-exempt, et cetera, versus an office building. But nonetheless, we are humans. We all want to grow. We all want to grow the company. And I think here, equity of access to things like AI, et cetera, it's just common sense, right? It's just common sense and it's smart business sense. Rising tide lifts all boats. That's our philosophy. And we believe there's a set of fundamental things associated with AI and digital skills that whatever you're doing, you need to know.
Yeah, and I guess for us, every associate on the floor has a handheld device. So the vision would be, how do we integrate Nadia into that device? Today we have basic product knowledge on that. So if you came into a store and asked an associate, I'm installing a water heater, what do I need to buy? They could take you through the list, the item list that you would need. I see it the same way and actually more impactful. So if you could, they're going to have a phone. If you ask how many items do we have in a particular SKU, they can scan the SKU. They could take a picture of the SKU. It'll all pop up. SKU is stock keeping unit for those not in the retail world. We've made that investment. I think we could piggyback on it, and it would make so much more sense.
Well, thank you both for sharing your experiences and wisdom.
Well, that was something.
Yeah.
Alex, what did you think?
Well, I am impressed that we have, I think, 225 people who have sat with us through a virtual version of our summit. So thank you all so much for hanging in there. I know it's a bit of an atypical format. Lots of good questions in the chat, and I know we have a couple minutes, so maybe Anand, you and I can speak to a few. One that certainly I think is on everyone's mind with the proliferation of new applications right now that are based on the LLMs is like, how do we create a seamless environment that we are not just like overrun with too many options? How are all of these applications going to be part of a cohesive ecosystem? How are they all going to orchestrate together? There's so much around MCP, agent to agent, and I think that it's a confusing and challenging time. So maybe Anand, do you want to speak a little bit to how like Valence is thinking about the enterprise ecosystem and how we fit in, and then I can maybe speak to some of the data questions that have come up.
Yeah, and it really is it's an important question, and I think those companies that have been experimenting and deploying a variety of different AI tools are a bit further ahead. And so one of the things that we're seeing is that it is important to teach your various tools about each other, so that when the employee goes in and has a conversation, they are able to get redirected and guided to exactly what the right tool is. The other thing that we see as really helpful is to place the tools within the flow that people are already following. So, for example, when we turn on our Microsoft Teams application, we see usage and frequency go up quite dramatically. And that makes sense, right? You don't want to put barriers in the way of people using it. And the third thing is to be quite intentional about the way in which you deploy individual tools in service of particular outcomes, so that it's not just about, which I think was sort of a first couple of years of AI, where we just deploy a bunch of tools and give people access and hope that they use it. We're now seeing companies get a lot more intentional and prescriptive about what they want people to do with individual tools. So integrating Nadia, for example, into your performance management process, or a specific learning program, or your goal setting flow. And that really helps to increase the precision with which users come to Nadia as one tool, and similar for other ecosystem elements. I don't know, Alex, if you'd add anything else to that.
No, I don't think so, Anna, and I think you really covered it, and how we're thinking about all of this.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There were also some questions about like, how are we measuring usage? What does sustained learning look like? And when we work with our clients, we're very candid. Like, this is a new world, right? The level of unstructured data that organizations now have is brand new, and it's upending a lot of the modalities that we had to learn about our employees before, right? Engagement surveys, 360s, are those intermittent processes still the right way to gauge what's going on in an organization? So one of the exciting things that we are able to do, we have a live dashboard in the application for the system admins, and we can see, okay, of course, usage, of course, that's cut by audiences and populations, but then what are people talking about? What skills are being referred to over and over? Does it seem like people's skills on these certain topics are improving? And a lot of times people pose like, well, how do you know? Like, how can you say that the communication skills improving? And I say, I don't know. We're like 90% sure that that is the intuition that we're getting, but it's a new area of science, really. How do we, people who have been data scientists for a long time are learning new skills to sort through all of this unstructured data. So the way we approach these new moments is really a partnership with our clients to say, like, what might be possible? What would you want to pose of this data set? What information that you've never had before might help you create your talent agenda and frame up what learning you think might be most important? And can you see this on a much more audience and population-based level than we've been able to previously? So I know we've got 1 minute, but I'll close out that it's an exciting time. We're happy that you've all chosen to learn a little bit from us as we kind of navigate this moment.
Thank you for joining, everyone, and look forward to seeing you at future sessions as well.